During an argument, my dad screamed, "You're just a burden. We'd be better off without you." So I packed my things and left that night. Weeks later, my sister texted, "Why isn't the mortgage covered this month?" I simply responded, "Guess you're better off without me." The silence after that clarified everything. I, 32M, never thought a single argument could unravel 32 years of my life. But here I am, 3 months later, watching everything I built crumble from a distance I created myself. The night it happened, I was exhausted. I'd been working double shifts at the warehouse for 6 months straight, trying to keep up with Dad's medical bills after his stroke. Mom had been gone for 3 years, and the responsibility of keeping our family afloat had somehow become mine alone. My sister lived in the house too, but she was finding herself after her latest breakup, which apparently meant sleeping until noon and contributing nothing to the household expenses. I came home that Tuesday to find Dad in his usual spot on the couch, remote in hand, complaining about the cable bill. My sister was in the kitchen, making herself a sandwich with groceries I'd bought. The mortgage payment was due in 2 days, and I was short again. I'd been covering it entirely for 8 months now, ever since Dad's disability payments got reduced. I tried to bring up the money situation gently. I explained that I couldn't keep shouldering everything alone, that maybe my sister could get a part-time job, or Dad could look into additional assistance programs. The conversation escalated quickly. Dad's face turned red as he struggled to get up from the couch, his words slurring slightly from the stroke's lingering effects. He told me I was ungrateful, that he'd raised me and put a roof over my head for 18 years. I reminded him that I'd been putting a roof over his head for the past 2 years. That's when his voice rose to a shout, and the words that would change everything came tumbling out. He screamed that I was just a burden, that they'd all be better off without me. My sister stood there in the kitchen doorway, saying nothing, just watching. Something inside me snapped, not with anger, but with a cold, clear realization. I looked around the house I'd been paying for, at the people I'd been supporting, and felt a strange sense of freedom wash over me. I went upstairs to my room and started packing. I didn't take much, just my clothes, laptop, and a few personal items. I could hear Dad downstairs, still ranting about ungrateful children and how hard his life was. My sister had retreated to her room, probably texting her friends about the family drama. I loaded my car in 3 trips. As I was putting the last bag in the trunk, Dad appeared at the front door. He asked where I thought I was going, his tone suggesting he expected me to apologize and come back inside. I told him I was giving him what he wanted, a life without the burden of me. He laughed and said I'd be back within a week, that I couldn't survive on my own. I drove to a motel across town and paid for a week up front. The room was small and smelled like disinfectant, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I fell asleep without worrying about someone else's problems. The next morning, I called my bank and removed Dad and my sister from my accounts. They'd had access for emergencies, but I realized there would be no more emergencies that were my responsibility. I also called the mortgage company and explained that I would no longer be making payments on the house. The representative was confused since my name wasn't on the deed, but I clarified that I'd been making payments as a family member and would be discontinuing that arrangement. I found a small apartment within my budget and signed a lease. It was a studio, barely 400 square feet, but the rent was something I could handle on my warehouse salary without stretching myself thin. I bought a used mattress and some basic furniture from thrift stores. It wasn't much, but it was peaceful. The first week passed without any contact from my family. I wondered if Dad had told my sister what happened, or if they assumed I was just having a tantrum and would return soon. I focused on settling into my new routine: work, gym, home. Simple and stress-free. By the second week, I started getting calls from Dad. I let them go to voicemail. His messages started apologetic, saying he'd been stressed and didn't mean what he said. When I didn't respond, the tone shifted to demanding, then angry, then desperate. He needed me to come home, he said. There were bills to pay and things to figure out. I deleted the messages without responding. My sister tried calling too, but less frequently. Her voicemails were more manipulative, talking about family loyalty and how Dad was struggling. She mentioned that she'd started looking for work, but hadn't found anything yet. I noticed she didn't actually apologize for standing there silently while Dad called me a burden. 3 weeks after I left, my phone buzzed with a text from my sister. She asked why the mortgage wasn't covered this month. The message was casual, almost entitled, as if I was just late with a regular payment rather than someone who'd been told the family would be better off without him. I stared at the message for a long time. Part of me wanted to explain everything, to detail how I'd been supporting them financially and emotionally for years while sacrificing my own future. But then I remembered Dad's words and my sister's silence, and I realized they already knew all of this. I typed back a simple response. Guess you're better off without me. The silence that followed was deafening. No immediate response, no frantic calls, just nothing. That silence told me everything I needed to know about how they really viewed me, not as a son or brother, but as a financial resource they'd taken for granted. Update 1. It's been 6 weeks since I left, and the reality of their situation is apparently setting in. Dad called yesterday, and this time I answered. His voice was different, smaller, more fragile. He asked if I was okay, where I was living, if I needed anything. The irony wasn't lost on me. He explained that they'd received a foreclosure notice. The bank wanted 3 months of back payments plus fees, totaling nearly $8,000. He'd applied for assistance programs, but the process was slow. My sister had finally gotten a job at a retail store, but her part-time wages barely covered groceries. I listened without saying much. When he finished, he asked if I could help them figure something out. Not demanding this time, but asking. I told him I'd think about it, and hung up. The truth is, I could help. I'd been saving money for the first time in years, and I had enough to cover what they owed. But I kept thinking about that night, about being called a burden, about my sister's silence. I wondered if this was what they needed to learn, that I wasn't just an ATM with legs. I drove by the house last weekend. The lawn was overgrown, and there was a foreclosure notice taped to the front door. I sat in my car across the street for 10 minutes, watching. Dad appeared at the window, looking older and more frail than I remembered. For a moment, I felt guilty. But then I remembered all the times I'd worked overtime to cover their expenses, all the dates I'd canceled because I couldn't afford to go out after paying their bills, all the dreams I'd put on hold to keep their lives comfortable. The guilt faded. Update 2. 2 months after leaving, I got a call from my uncle, Dad's brother. He'd heard about the situation and wanted to understand what happened. I explained everything, including the financial arrangements I'd been managing. He was shocked. He'd assumed Dad was handling his own affairs and had no idea I'd been supporting the household. My uncle offered to help mediate a family meeting. He suggested that maybe we could work something out, that family was important and grudges only hurt everyone involved. I agreed to meet, but only at a neutral location, a coffee shop downtown. The meeting was awkward. Dad looked terrible. He'd lost weight and seemed to have aged years in just 2 months. My sister was there too, fidgeting with her phone and avoiding eye contact. My uncle tried to facilitate the conversation, asking each of us to explain our perspective. Dad went first. He apologized for what he'd said that night, claiming he was stressed and in pain from his medical issues. He acknowledged that I'd been helping financially, but said he didn't realize how much I'd been contributing. He asked if I'd consider coming home and working together to save the house. My sister's apology was less convincing. She said she was sorry I felt unappreciated and that she was working now to contribute more. She mentioned that losing the house would be devastating for Dad's recovery and asked if I could find it in my heart to help family. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I explained that I'd been supporting them for years while sacrificing my own financial security and future. I told them that being called a burden after everything I'd done had shown me how they really viewed me. I said I was building a new life now and wasn't interested in returning to the old arrangement. My uncle tried to find middle ground, suggesting maybe I could help with the immediate crisis while they worked on becoming more self-sufficient. But I'd already made my decision. I told them I hoped they'd figure things out, but it wouldn't be my responsibility anymore. Dad started crying. It was the first time I'd seen him cry since Mom's funeral. He said he was sorry, that he'd been wrong, that he needed me. My sister joined in, saying she'd change, that she'd take on more responsibility. I felt something, but it wasn't the guilt or obligation I'd expected. It was sadness that it had taken losing their financial support for them to realize my value. I told them I loved them, but that love didn't mean I had to sacrifice my life for theirs. Update 3. It's been 4 months now. The house was foreclosed on last month. Dad moved in with my uncle temporarily, and my sister found a roommate situation across town. They're both working. Dad found a part-time job he can manage with his limitations, and my sister is working full-time now. I've been promoted to a supervisor position at the warehouse. The extra money has allowed me to move to a better apartment and start saving for my own future. I'm taking night classes to finish my degree, something I'd put on hold years ago to work more hours for their expenses. Dad calls occasionally now. The conversations are different. He asks about my life, my job, my plans. He doesn't ask for money anymore. He updates me on his situation without making it sound like my problem to solve. It's the kind of relationship I'd wanted for years but never thought possible. My sister and I text sometimes. She's apparently doing well at her job and has started dating someone new. She seems more independent than I've ever seen her. In a strange way, forcing her to stand on her own feet might have been the best thing I could have done for her. I don't regret leaving. That night when Dad called me a burden, he accidentally told me the truth about how they saw me. But he was wrong about one thing. They weren't better off without me. They just needed to learn how to be responsible for themselves. The silence after my text response had clarified everything, just like I'd said. It showed me that they'd never valued me as a person, only as a provider. Now that they've learned to value themselves and take responsibility for their own lives, maybe we can actually have a real family relationship. Sometimes the best revenge isn't hurting someone back. It's removing yourself from a situation where you're not valued and watching them realize what they've lost. The house is gone, but maybe we've all gained something more important, the knowledge that we can survive on our own. I still drive by the old neighborhood sometimes. There's a new family in the house now. I can see kids' toys in the yard and fresh paint on the shutters. It looks happy. I'm happy too, in my small apartment with my simple life and my plans for the future. Dad was right about one thing that night. I was a burden. But I was a burden on myself, carrying weight that was never mine to carry. Now that I've put it down, I'm finally free to build the life I want instead of just maintaining the life others expected me to provide. The mortgage may not be covered anymore, but I am. And that makes all the difference.